Hey, this is going to be a video for Gary on Twitter, Gary Systems. I'm just going to call you Gary. Regarding a post that you made, which I'm going to share the screen right here. Except for Flight 77, which was next to impossible for most seasoned pilots, why not just land on the roof? Why corkscrew to high speed and skim the ground to hit the newly reinforced side of the building? Oh, and this. And then this video is linking the Donald Rumsfeld speech on September 10, 2001, about $2.3 trillion. So I'm going to try my best to tackle each of the points that you raised here, Gary, and do my best to explain about certain things relating to these statements that you make and about some conspiracies that are surrounding them. And it comes from the truther community or the fringe movements itself. And sometimes these statements can get misconstrued or just misinformed over the years. And, you know, you're left with what? What am I going to believe now? However, let's talk about your first point. Your first point was, except for Flight 77, which was next to impossible for most seasoned pilots. Well, not really the case. We do have people who basically have done simulations regarding Flight 77 and the reconstruction of the flight pattern that they took. And amateur pilots go into these simulations and they basically could recreate the attack. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically share the screen, show you one such video that still exists, and it's this video here. It's 4 minutes, 33 seconds long, and this is basically a simulation of the attack on the Pentagon with Airbus A320 simulation program. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to use the exact flight route of Flight 77 because the flight data recorder existed and was recovered at the Pentagon. And what we're going to do is watch this guy, who's not a pilot, recreate the same pattern, flight pattern, as Flight 77.
После этого взлет был. Сейчас где-то 200 км в час приедем. 280, если 90, 300 и ротейт. Еще. Насколько я помню, что твой Пентагон он вошел где-то на 700 км в час. Да, где-то 330.
There's not much movement going on with this controller, right? It's like driving a car.
Вот на такой высоте они примерно вошли.
50, 40, 20, retard.
Чуть везде были не пролетели.
Как весело.
То есть, как бы, если подходить чуть более полого, то эффект Земли будет чувствоваться примерно при проходе 50 футов, где-то так. А самолет летит по ощущениям как один самолет, и где-то после 50 футов на 40 чувствуется, что он как будто в подушечку проваливается. Это мы сейчас на посадке с вами попробуем. Чуть опустим. Вот так, хорошо.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard. 5.
I'm going to do it again.
Хорошо.
That's one for one.
Теперь. Это нормально. И ротейт. Я заметил один момент. На Airbus
You don't have to pause. Some of these have a card. Now remember, the Flight 77 hijacker, the pilot, had for half the duration on autopilot. These guys not on autopilot.
Видите, не дает. Это включился режим защиты от оверспида, самолет сам поднимает нос. Потому что мы достигли максимального угла атаки, и он сейчас, в данный момент, самолет поддерживает. То есть бочку он тоже не позволит. Нет. В нормальных условиях нет. Если отключить некоторые системы, то можно. Но чтобы сделать бочку, я с включенным движением тренажера я бы ее не делал, а то мы можем стать героями новостей с заваленным тренажером на ночь. нас очень быстро начнет разгонять скорость. Ну, в землю не прилетайте, пожалуйста. Види, сколько 15 дает.
Too low, terrain.
They
Too
come.
low, terrain. Too low, terrain. Too low, terrain. Too low, terrain. Pull up. Pull up. Too low, terrain. 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 Terrain, terrain.
Two. See, now look, that's the simulation. That's a non-expert. Okay, the people that you're listening to are pilots for 9/11 Truth, and they're not commercial pilots. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. The founder, Rob Balsamo, is not a commercial pilot. Never flew commercial airline plane, nor was he licensed to. And the problem with those people is that they automatically saw 9/11 as an inside job. So they basically went into 9/11 with a biased mindset. They didn't basically study 9/11 to see whether there was an inside job or not. They basically went into it saying it's an inside job. So they only looked at information that agrees with their worldview, even if they have to outright lie about it. Now, when it comes to even handling what the steering turn looks like, right? So here's the steering wheel. Here's another video of it. So this video is the 9/11 attack black box reconstruction. So you can see this is the loop that you're talking about. And watch how easy the loop is here, right? Speedometer, 264 miles an hour. Here's the wheel, steering. And as you could see, this loop that you're saying that went at high speeds is not true. He's barely even moving it. This is exactly what it would look like on the plane. No steering hard or whatnot. It's like driving a car. As you could see, 200 and what is that, 66 miles an hour? Not even near max. This is the loop. As you can see, lowering speed, 250 now. Here's the loop. You see? 100. 320 now, 321. Steer wheel's barely moving. This is the recreation of the loop. I'm sorry, this is the speedometer. This is the altitude. Geez. So 270 is 34,000 feet. 3,000? What is that? Can't tell. 34,000? Yeah, 273 miles an hour. Excuse me for being wrong about that. This is the altitude and the speedometer. So they're not even reaching near peak. So there's the loop. Ain't that hard? I just wanted to share that. That's all. Regarding the recreation of the plane's altitude and speed. It's not very hard. And also, I'll share this in the description box for you. This is the National Transportation Safety Board flight path, American Airlines Flight 77. And it shows some simple maps. Here it is. And this is where that loop comes from. And as you can see, the highest it reached was 35,000 feet, 9 o'clock at D, and then it starts to descend. So be it. There's the loop. That ain't so hard when you're going only 270 miles an hour. So I'll share that with you so you could read it at your own leisure and have something to read. All right. Now, you also said, why not just land on the roof? Well, the mission was to just impact the plane, right? So you're assuming that the damage would be most notably on the roof. But to them, they basically just wanted to hit the Pentagon, and they just happened to hit the reinforced area of the Pentagon. There was a project back in October of 2000, October 24th of 2000, called the Pentagon Mass Casualty Project, which was codenamed Pentagon Moscow, which was basically a contingency exercise that was held in the office of the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, in the conference room between October 24th and October 26th of 2000. And the exercise required emergency response teams, members of the Defense Protective Services and the U.S. government officials to conduct emergency simulations in preparation for a plane crash into the Pentagon. Now, this is what they were preparing for, and I'll show you a picture. And it says something about you. Here's the courtyard. Here's the plane. And you can see it's not a big plane, but it's almost like a passenger, like a small personal plane crashing into the courtyard. Now, whether this was in preparation to 9/11 itself wouldn't surprise me. The Pentagon's been a victim of terrorism for over 20 years. I mean, bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, even during the Bajinka plot, mentioned Pentagon as an issue to be hit, and that's 1995, 6 years prior to 9/11. So here's a real anomaly for you, Gary, that the intelligence services knew that the Pentagon, World Trade Center were targets, and they didn't beef up security. Neither did they beef up security for immigration. In fact, in the year 1998, even earlier, I think, they had what they called the Visa Express program for Saudi Arabia, where they didn't want to offend their regional partner because of the amounts of money that's involved with their partnership, which is in the hundreds of billions in terms of oil regulation. And in terms of how much money they spend on our elected officials in persuading for certain legislation to follow, regulations and bills and whatnot, and to sell them weapons. So you have, we could talk about the partnership between the kingdom and the United States and how it shapes foreign policy, and there's a lot to unpack there. So yeah, we're not talking about, like, first of all, and it would be a much harder position to crash into the roof. And if that's your beef, that this guy couldn't possibly hit the Pentagon, it's such a impossible turn, even though I just showed you wasn't very impossible at all. It's, even a amateur pilot could do it. That it would be much harder to nosedive into the roof. That would have been harder. So you also asked, why corkscrew at high speed and skim the ground to hit the newly reinforced side of the building? Well, the object was to hit the Pentagon. And it didn't reach high speed until near the end of the turn. Now what I'll do is I'll basically play that part again and play it for you where it reached its max target. What I'll do is I'll share the screen. Where did it here? We will show right about. Well, I made another mistake, by the way. This is the speedometer. This is the altitude. And this is I don't know. I thought this was the speedometer. No, this is the altitude. And this is, I don't know what this is. Don't know. But yeah, look, as you can see, it's heading, that's the Pentagon. They're at 300 miles an hour. 2,000 feet in the air, and they'll still, as you can see, descending, speed catching up. There it is. Nose descending now. Speed catching up great exponentially. 368. So look, I'll even turn it back. Okay, 6,000 feet, 290, about 300 miles an hour, right? Then when they make that turn right into the Pentagon, look, 367, 368, they're seconds away. 1,000, look at this. Seconds away. Watch the speed. Here's the thing. There you go. Didn't reach top speed until they got near it. So I'll share that with you as well. You also said about this. I'm going to share this video. It's Donald Rumsfeld. So let's watch it. It's only a minute long.
That they can fail and die, fail to adapt. And the fact that they can fail and die is what provides the incentive to survive. But governments can't die. So we need to find other incentives for bureaucracy to adapt and improve. The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector. But not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Okay, so that's what we're going to concentrate on. We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. Now, look, you got to read into words, right? We cannot track. The money isn't missing, that they can't track it, okay? Now, this is talking about, first of all, this conversation was held in Washington, D.C. It was called the Acquisition and Logistics Excellence Week, where Rumsfeld and other officials talked with reporters about the need to realign or redefine the Defense Department's businesses and practices. And he brought this up. Now, you know, the big conspiracy is that he did this the day before the attacks. Now, if let's just say, for example, Gary, that Rumsfeld somehow is telling you that the Pentagon stole $2.3 trillion. First of all, why would he announce it at all? Secondly, why would he announce it the day before September 11, 2001? Just think. Why would he announce it? And why would he announce it on the day before the attacks? It wouldn't make sense. Why not just announce it at all and just have the plane crash and, you know, the investigation is over, right? That's what certain people in the truth movement think. Now, of course, what they don't realize is that it's not about the money that was stolen. It was misallocated of funds. Now, 2.3 trillion, this is not 1 year's worth, okay? Now, in regards to this story was about an investigation into the Pentagon's budget recovery program. Now, the 2.3 trillion that the Pentagon couldn't show receipts for was just corrections of mistakes made in earlier adjustments to the Defense Department's accounting program. Now, each adjustment represents the Defense Department's accountant's attempt to correct a discrepancy. Now, the military has hundreds of computer systems to run accounts as diverse as like healthcare, payroll, inventory, but they're not integrated. So in other words, each program system is separate. So the Pentagon spends, let's say, $100 million on healthcare of their soldiers. And then you have $50 million on payroll when it comes to, you know, their secretaries, their generals, sergeants, whatnot. And of course, GI bills and whatnot. Then you have a computer made for just inventory, spending on tanks, missiles, weapons, stuff like this. What they didn't have at the time was an integrated program where all this is linked into one. So each program was different and had different functions. They didn't produce numbers up to accounting standards and failed to keep running totals of what's coming in and out of the programs. And that's coming from the Pentagon and congressional officials when they said that the money couldn't be accounted for. Now, you have now, according to the Defense Department, and I'll quote them, these entries were processed to force financial data to agree with various data sources to correct errors and to add new data. The magnitude of accounting entries required to compile the Department of Defense financial statements highlights the significant problems Department of Defense has producing accurate and reliable financial statements with existing systems and processes. Now, there was an investigation that was done, including a whistleblower by the name of Jim Minery, who is the Defense Finance and Accounting Service at the Pentagon. And I'll read you what he said. Now, this is coming from an article that's dated January 29, 2002, where he says that we know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on. Now, Minery, who's a former Marine turned whistleblower, he risked his job by speaking out about the millions he knows were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. And Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the countries looking for records. And he was told that the director looked at him and said, "Why do you care about this stuff?" You know, his supervisor was asking why he cares about doing a good job. But he was reassigned, and officials said that they covered up the problem by just writing it off. And that, according to Minery, they tried to cover it up, but when the corruption comes in, they have to come up with the fact that they can't do their job. So the Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate financial statements. It wouldn't be so impossible. I'm not saying it was possible at the time, but it's very hard when you have a separate entity like the Inspector General who's doing an investigation into that entity's backgrounds, or whatever criminality or lack thereof. So what happened is that basically, who's the biggest waste spender in the world? I would say the Pentagon is. I mean, they spend trillions. I mean, 3 trillion just in Afghanistan alone in 20 years, close to $1 trillion in Iraq. So, I mean, we're talking trillion, right? $1 trillion. Spending money on what? Spending money on bullets and over excess of missiles and over excess of jeeps, helicopters, munitions, helmets, boots, socks, you name it. You want it, it's produced. As long as the inventory's in, they'll make it happen. And when it comes to war, I mean, you know the old saying from that general, what was it? That war is a racket, right? As long as you have a war, you have the economy which spends money into that war. Now, we've come a long way since World War II, when we'll have actual production lines with men and women. And we're now living in a technological age where we don't have to spend money on men and women, but we have to spend money on people operating those machines, but they don't cost as much. All right. And you're going to have one guy who's in a factory rather than 100 people in a factory, right? So that's more money to spend on wasteful munitions in a war, right? That's where the money was spent on, but they can't account for it because much of this accounting went into what? An over expenditure of what? Who knows? Could be anything. It could be weapons. It could be payroll. It could be insurance. It could be anything. Is it legal? Well, we don't know, right? We do know that that number is much higher now. All right. When Pentagon does its audit, and I think it's every 2 years, all right, that number gets higher. So instead of 2.3 trillion, because that's what it was at 2001, it was 2.3 trillion. In fact, it was a little bit higher than that. But according to those specific programs, it was 2.3 trillion. Well, guess what it is now? It's over 13. So, yeah, it's not like how the truth movement basically says, "Oh, they just stole 2.3 trillion." That, that's ridiculous. First of all, you can't just steal $2.3 trillion without anybody noticing it. And the story broke, by the way, in March of 4th, 2000. I'm just going to show you the article itself so that you can see that it wasn't just announced on September 10th by Donald himself. So you can see Pentagon's finances in disarray by the Gazette Times, but it was reported by the Associated Press. As you can see, Associated Press, John Donnelly, and the date. Okay, what does that say? March 4th, 2000. Okay, It says March 4th of 2000. Okay. That's when this story broke. The military money managers last year made $7 trillion in adjustments to their financial ledgers in an attempt to make them add up. The Pentagon's Inspector General said in a report released Friday, the Pentagon could not show receipts for 2.3 trillion of those changes, and $0.5 trillion of it was just corrections and mistakes made in early adjustments. So I'm going to share that with you in the description box, and so you could read it at your own leisure as well. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. It was just a short video just made for you, Gary, but I'm going to upload it to YouTube so you can have it. And anybody watching regarding these issues that sometimes get often misconstrued by people in the 9/11 Truth Movement, I hope this is beneficial in clearing up those questions.